Hey, this is Mike Moo from HipaaWatchdog.com, where we are your virtual HIPAA privacy officer. All right, this is the first time I've shown this on video. Usually I present this on presentations. This is what is affectionately called in the industry the HIPAA Wall of Shame. You can check this out yourself. The Office of Civil Rights portal.hhs.gov. You can look for the Office of Civil Rights Breach and Breach Report. The reason why this is all on here is not because the covered entities want them on here. This is actually a requirement under HIPAA Code of Federal Regulations. If you have any breach that affects 500 or more individuals, meaning their PHI information got breached, you are required to report it. And there's a number of ways that you got to report it, and different states also have their own different reporting measures. But sooner or later, it will end up here. And whether or not you report it or not, someone else will do it for you, particularly if any patients find out their information was breached. Eventually, you will get investigated. And these are the ones, all the breaches reported within the last 2 years that are currently under investigation by the Office of Civil Rights. Now, what do you see here? So the latest breach submission date was just last week. Right today is, August 7th, 2017. As you can see, a lot of the recent breaches have all been due to email. Look at this, 1,200 patients. Type of breach was unauthorized access and disclosure of information, all through email. Next one is through hacking and IT incidents. Unauthorized access disclosure on email. And then we have paper. Paper you don't hear a whole lot about because paper is a physical property, an item. And usually if you've been around for a while, you handle it fairly well. Apparently Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee did not, and it was a health plan. And while we don't know exactly what happened here because the Office of Civil Rights only provides these details, later on during the course of the investigation, when they finally do their reports, you can kind of see what the resolution agreements were. All right. But I can think of many different scenarios for each of these types of information got breached. Something often very common in the paper and was recently noted on the Office of Civil Rights, was a case where old patient records were actually stored at a storage facility. And unfortunately, during my course of doing security risk analysis, I actually see a lot of private practices and small healthcare providers store their records off-site. And when they do this, sometimes they'll use something like Public Storage or some other storage company, Storage Incorporated. It doesn't really matter, Acme Storage. That is actually an unauthorized access and disclosure of information. That directly itself is a breach, and technically you do have to report that. Why is that? Well, because these public storage places are not going to be responsible for any number of things, including your property, right? Even if you get insurance, they won't. Even if you pay for their insurance, they won't sign the business associate agreement. By that alone, is actually an unauthorized access and disclosure of the records. So let's say hypothetically Acme Healthcare Provider Incorporated, has a bunch of records. They're remodeling. I'm giving you a real world example that I've seen. They're remodeling their office and they need to get these records out of there temporarily so they can redo the records room. So what they do, they contracted a public storage company and they put all their stuff inside of public storage. Same thing as anybody, John Doe, yourself, myself, can go to public storage company and just rent a 14 by 14, 10 by 10, and put the records in there. By doing that alone, it's already a breach. It is an unauthorized access and disclosure of information. Because you did not have the business associate agreement, because they did not agree to have the appropriate physical, technical, administrative safeguards covering your data, in there that you are responsible for protecting. The covered entity is responsible for protecting this information. By doing that, that is actually an automatic breach. So if you're listening to this and you're watching this video and you're seeing that, please don't do that. There are definitely HIPAA appropriate storage facilities within most major metropolitan areas, and if you just Google that and do your own due diligence, check it out, see why, have them explain to you why they are going to protect your information and how they are able to sign a HIPAA business associate agreement, then you're good. All right, that is a better calculated risk. It's not an automatic breach. All right, going back to the rest of this, let's talk a little bit about the email here. What is unauthorized access and disclosure? That simply means that someone or some company was able to view or access or not take responsibility, but just have unauthorized access to email that contains protected health information. All right. That could be any number of things. That could be somebody sharing their password to their email account, or it could be someone's cell phone or tablet or laptop that synchronizes email onto their phone and having that accessed by someone else that is not authorized. Right? Maybe by a non-employee, by a family member, by a friend. That is unauthorized access and disclosure. Now, there could be thousands and thousands of emails in there. Okay, so that's why it could affect thousands of individuals, because a lot of email servers keep this information, and depending on the synchronization rules between the server and the device, it would have all those emails with all those records on there. Okay. Unfortunately, I talk to a lot of places where they tell me, well, Mike, the email that we use is Office 365. It's in the cloud. We're okay, right? No, that is not true. You are not automatically okay just simply because it's in the cloud. In the cloud, what that means is it is on someone else's server. You're paying for them to host your data. That means that in order for you to appropriately safeguard that information, at the bare minimum, you are required to have a business associate agreement with said company, hosting provider, and hosting service. They have to agree to the same physical, technical, administrative safeguards and have to do security risk analysis on their own things to make sure that they are protecting their servers from unauthorized access as well. So what happens if they fail? If they fail, it becomes a breach and you have to report it. And that could be another case over here as well. Maybe these could very well be cases where they thought that they had a business associate agreement. Maybe they did. But the business associate agreement, they come back and they say, we're sorry, we had an incident. It's pretty common. You can just Google anytime security breach 2017, and you will see some of the most popular data security breaches so far. You can just look at them. There's a whole list of a lot of them. Some of them reported, some larger ones are not necessarily reported because they could be outside the country and they don't have the same rules, laws, and regulations, or it hasn't caught up to them yet. But if their information got breached somehow for whatever reason, they got to report it to you and they got to report it themselves, and then you also have to report it as well, and you are also responsible for a good part of it. Just because you signed a business associate agreement doesn't mean it's not going to affect you. It will affect you, and you will end up in the wall of shame. So you really have to be really careful about choosing who it is that you're going to be custodian, have data, or have any of your PHI data, whether you're processing, transmitting, etc., on their servers. And as you can see, unfortunately, for these latest ones within a week's time frame, look at all these emails that have been either hacked or unauthorized disclosures were made. Okay. So these are unauthorized access to disclosures. Hacking IT incident. This is pretty bad, and usually you will see this to be the case for smaller healthcare providers and practices. Why? Because a lot of them, unfortunately, I see a lot of them, they don't have the best IT in the world. And maybe they don't, maybe they aren't doing the security risk analysis, letting them know. Or maybe they're not following general good practice guidelines about how you're supposed to be securing your network and your server. Okay. So these would be hacking IT incidents. Very commonly would be really bad, poor passwords and unpatched email servers or network devices. These are the number one reasons why your email would be hacked or have an IT incident. Would be through that or phishing attacks. Okay, so some of those things can be handled through employee training and partly through technology that would help block against phishing attacks that happen pretty much all the time, every day. Remember, even though your technologies can block a good part of the phishing attacks that are happening worldwide, all it takes is just one of them to get you in to some account that has access to all these emails or some account that's been around for a while, right? These may not be administrative accounts that had access to 2,300 individuals. It could be a provider or let's say a referral coordinator that has all these emails. And these are not even if you have a policy that says you can't send out any PHI to patients, which is a great policy, by the way, even if they allow it, even if they sign the consent form. But patients, you can't block patients from emailing you at your organization. So then you are actually automatically then responsible for that information that comes in. Because even if they send it to you unsolicited, now it's on your servers. Now you are responsible for it. Okay. And if that stuff gets out, you are responsible for it, and you would end up in a wall of shame if one of those accounts got phished attacked, passwords weren't changed, simple number of things, or they got tricked into giving up their passwords, then someone is able to download and synchronize these accounts to God knows where, to what country. You will end up in a wall of shame if it affects over 500 individuals. My guess is that's what's happened in a lot of these cases, because I see this time and time and time again. You really have to let your staff know and be aware that email might as well be public if it's not encrypted. Okay. Now, if you're a subscriber for Hipaa Watchdog, feel free to set up a session with me. We'll talk about different ways we can set up encryption, different companies. You can do your own research yourself. There are major companies that do this. There's any number of them. Just make sure that they will sign HIPAA Business Associate Agreement. And if they are, in fact, great about protecting all this information, and if you're hosting on other servers, they'd be happy to sign that with you, if need be, right? Only if they're going to be accessing your data or have access to your data, right? I often get asked, well, Mike, is Gmail okay? And the answer to that is generally no. Okay, no if you're not paying for it, even if they have their own encryption from their own servers. Right? So that's one. And number two is they won't sign a business associate agreement with you on a free account. You actually have to pay for one of their G Suite ones that will sign. And so you know, just because they sign it, that doesn't mean you're automatically okay. Okay, you still have to enable encryption. You still have to consider the risks when you're sending from your Google account, even if it's your domain name, right? Sending out any protected health information out to someone else, because that goes through all these other servers and it's not encrypted along the way. Any number of those servers or people that have access to those servers or computers would potentially be able to open up those messages, and then you would have a breach on your hand, right? It doesn't even have to be just server related. It could be a person. It could be someone snooping on the network through a connection, right? Okay, this rant is getting a little bit long. I wanted to just talk about some of these recent breaches here, and I want to prevent you guys from being on this wall of shame. So those are some of those tips on there. I will mention one other thing, and when you're accessing public Wi-Fi, okay, that itself is not secure. Public Wi-Fi, I'm talking about places like Starbucks, free county public Wi-Fi, city Wi-Fi, library Wi-Fi, that is the least secure of all the internet connections that you have in place. Make sure that whatever you're doing is encrypted. You can do certain VPNs, right? Just make it a policy not to access anything unless you're through your own VPN or through your own connection. But I would just say, just don't use the public Wi-Fi for anything really important that might affect you or might put you on this wall of shame. It's not worth it. And even if you have a VPN, if you get a third-party VPN, you got to be careful, right? I just saw recently in the news that there's been some VPN companies who claim that they've been keeping everything private, but they're actually snooping in on your data to sell, okay? So be aware about that. All right, I'm going to end this video right now. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to comment down below, and I'd be happy to talk about it in a follow-up video. If not, if you're a subscriber of Hipaa Watchdog, please go ahead and set up a session. Ask me about any of these things. We'll go in more detail, more so for our clients than what we will do on here. And finally, I will say that this does not constitute any legal advice. These are all opinions of my own from being a security expert here in the healthcare field. All right, thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.